I want to introduce you all to Mark Zucker. He is the CEO of Zookbinders and MCVO Talent Resources, and he's here to share his very own business survival story. So I am just going to turn it on over to you, Mark, and let you take it from here.
Great, thank you. Let me get the technology set up first. Make sure we can see everything. Can you guys see a welcome slide?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Nice. Well, thanks for the introduction. Nice to meet everybody. And hopefully Mark can join and we can hear from him too. So I know Lori just introduced me as Mark Zucker, but what she didn't tell you is she was really hoping to get Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of CEO of Facebook, but apparently he just didn't want to devote his time to PLC. So instead, since we had very similar names, she asked me to jump in. So I'm happy to be here and meet everybody. Lori and I talked back in the fall. We had a conversation. I was telling her about my business, and she said, you know, you have a really good story, and you should come to our group. And we set up a date in May, and that seemed like so far off, and we were going to have a dinner and then a meeting probably at Maggiano somewhere. And I was so thrilled that we were allowed to do this through Zoom. And I was talking earlier with some of the other folks on the call that sometimes with Zoom, I feel like in some ways you get to know people a little bit better, and you got the private chat and breakout rooms, and in some ways you can integrate a little bit better. But I'm here to share a little bit about my story. One of the other things I talked to Lori about was, before the meeting, I asked her if she could do a little bit of a survey, just so I can get an understanding of what everybody's business is, how are things going. This was the pre-COVID survey, and the results were that 43% of the businesses, and this is all members, not just who's on the call, just all members in PLC, 43% were growing, 39% were flat, 17% were declining. So if you look at the 80-20 rule, 80% are either flat or growing. My question to those that were growing, or maybe just a general question to the group, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a level. How's business been since COVID? Is there anybody that's in the thumbs up area? We got one down.
Like flat.
Flat. Flat is good today. Flat is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I know some of you that don't have video cameras that are at disadvantage. Feel free to jump in via chat during the presentation. So I wanted to tell you about my story.
Mark, if I could just jump in for 1 second. By the way, guys, I ticked a box based on our previous conversations. And so these numbers came from me. So they're as relevant as that can be, I guess.
Got it. So think back to when we were little people and we used to have story time. That was always a lot of fun. And then when we had kids, we would tell stories to our kids, and it was always fun being the storyteller. So I thought for tonight that I would tell my story. And it's really a story. It's a 25-year story of entrepreneurship, ups, downs, innovations, pivots, just a lot of interesting things. And the thought is that at the end, I'm going to share a couple of takeaways that I feel like every business owner can benefit from. So my bio is I'm originally from New York. Occasionally you'll hear some words come out and you'll go, yeah, he's not from around here. I moved to Chicago in '94, so I'm almost 50% New York, 50% Chicago. Graduated from college. I was in advertising for a couple of years. Then I transitioned into the wedding album business for 7 years. And then I decided to move to Chicago, '94, started this business in '95. I came up with a 10-year business plan because I already knew the industry. That was the good news. I knew most of it. I knew the revenue generation side and the client-facing side. I really didn't know much about the financials and some other pieces, but I knew it was a viable business. I had a lot of ideas on how I could do it on my own, kind of like the lead singer of a band who says, yeah, our band's good, but if I break off on my own, I'm sure I could do a better job than, with my previous band, and then I get to pick all the new band members. So I came up with I wrote a 10-year business plan. which had a lot of financial projections and profit projections, because at the time of starting it, I had to borrow $100,000 from the SBA. I borrowed another $25,000 from friends and family. I put everything I had into it, and I want to make sure I wasn't making a colossal mistake. So the good news is we hit our plan. The original plan said year one, we're going to lose a ton of money. Year two, we were going to end the year almost at break even. Year three, we would break even and start to make money. And by years 4, 5, and 6, we'd be okay, and we would start to pay back all the debt that we borrowed. So knock on wood, everything worked out pretty well. I want to tell you a little bit about our business, what we do, and who our customer base is. So the company name is Zookbinders. We are a wedding album manufacturing company in Deerfield, and we do work for professional wedding and mitzvah photographers. So we're a B2B. So if you got married anywhere between 95 and today, there's a good chance that your album was made by us. We're somewhat invisible to the consumer because we don't advertise to the consumer. And the photographers, you know, when I started the business in 95, it was a really good economy for the wedding industry. Back then, a wedding would cost around $25,000, $30,000. Photographers usually spent about 10% of that. So you could hire a decent photographer in this area for about $2,500, and you get an album, you get a full day of coverage, you get 300 to 400 little proofs, and that was it. It was a good business. Every town seemed to have 3 photographers. They all did well. The margins were decent, and everything was going great until about 2008. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a chart that shows our sales growth. And, you know, the real takeaway here is we increased our business every year. And it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. And part of it was we were unique. We did some things differently. We were the only one in this area doing this kind of work. And life was good. Once we passed break even, we were making money. We were hiring people, taking more space, buying a lot of equipment, and life was wonderful. Now, if you look at where the slide ends, you'll notice it's on 2008. Now, I'm sure you can guess why 2008 changed everything, but it was really 3 things that happened to us. Number one, of course, was the financial crisis. Brides and grooms were cutting back on weddings, or on the cost of weddings. The parents that were helping to pay had a little less money. But really, the other factors were the disruption from digital photography. You know, it used to be these 3 photographers in every town were trained, they apprenticed, they had very expensive equipment, they had a brick and mortar business space. And now all of a sudden with digital, a hobbyist who had a decent eye and a $300 camera was suddenly a fierce competitor. And they could take an ad out on Craigslist, and, you know, they're competing with $2,500 studios that have locations, and they're saying, hey, this is a side hustle for me. I'm a school teacher by day, and I'm doing this for fun. I can charge $500, and I'm happy to do it. And so there was a lot of price erosion. There was a lot of just bitching and moaning, pardon my French, from our current client base. But the reality was it was the gig economy. It was kind of the way taxi cab drivers and limousine drivers responded to Uber. It was a change due to technology, and it was never going back. So one of the responses from our core customers were, well, if there's all these photographers that are so much lower priced, I've got to reconfigure my price list. So instead of starting at $2,500, they were lowering their prices to $1,800 and telling them, hey, you can get your wedding album, but now it's a la carte, it's no longer included. Great for them, not so great for us. So 2008 was kind of the beginning of an ugly trend for us. I'll show you some other things that happened after that. We've had a decline ever since. It's not as steep as the increases we had, and you'll see a couple of jumps every 3rd year. We've had a lot of distressed competitors shut their doors. We've been able to acquire them, and when we acquire them, you know, we have a nice little sales bump. But it's been an industry that's been in free fall. I have many competitors that are gone, and we've been able to stay alive because we just thought a little bit differently. So what's interesting about this is if I told you that we raised prices once in the last 10 years, our operating costs went up 2, 3, 4% every year, just like yours. And we were able to maintain the same profit margins every single year, even as our prices were declining. So how did we do that? It's an interesting story. So it really starts with a meeting that I used to have every year with my COO. So 2008 was, our high point. 2009 was a bad year. When we were planning for 2010, we thought, that was just one bad year. We had 13 good ones. I'm sure it's going to bounce back. And when 2010 didn't bounce back, we realized we've got to make some changes. So my COO, who I think is always the smartest person in the room, said to me at our annual budget meeting, she said, I'm working on the budget. Are we going to be able to raise our prices for the next year? And I said, I don't think we're ever going to raise them again. And she said, well, I know our costs are going to go up a lot, so here's an idea I have. We just hired a whole team of wedding album designers. It's a new service we're offering to help our clients. We had 5 people in Deerfield. We were paying $17 an hour, so that's $35,000 a year. Their benefits and taxes and all the ancillaries were another 7. So our all-in cost was $42,000 per designer for a total of $210. Now, this is also a loss leader. The idea was that if we do an album design and we do a really good job and we attract new clients, they'll eventually buy our albums from us, which is a much higher margin. So her thought to me was, she said, I'm Filipino. I grew up there. I know a lot about the country, and we have a lot of graphic design talent there. If we were to move our team overseas, instead of paying $42,000, we could pay $18,000 per designer. We would have no HR, no taxes, no benefits. That's an all-in cost. And instead of paying $210, we would pay $90. And I said to her, let me make sure I understand this. We're going to save $24,000 per employee, a total of $120. Well, that more than offsets all of our operating and cost increases. This is the easiest yes I ever had to make. And that was really the beginning of our journey into outsourcing. And then the following year, we had a similar meeting in November, and she said to me, are we going to raise prices? I said, I don't think we can. And she said, how about this? We have 3 software developers. We're paying between $90,000 and $100,000. All in, it's $112,000. If we hire somebody overseas, we'll pay $36,000 for a senior developer and save the company $76,000. Now, what's interesting, during the introductions, Aji said he's got a big team overseas in India. Same reason. Most of the IT, at least the shops that are, that are hiring multiple programmers, they're all doing it overseas because the economics are just so favorable. So we made this move. We tried it with one. We saved $76,000. I'm a happy guy as a business owner, and that's how 2 years in a row I was able to maintain my margins even though we had a drop in revenue. Now, the third year, and I was really getting used to these meetings in November because I was always waiting to see what tricks my COO had up her sleeve. And she said to me, we have 5 customer service reps. Half the calls that we get from clients are really silly things that can be handled by email or chat. It's usually they're too lazy to read our website and see what we offer. Why don't we move those overseas? So instead of paying $45,000 all in, we were paying $20,000. We saved the company another $50,000. So this really became our trend, and what we decided after year 3, that anytime there was attrition, anytime we were starting up a new department, a new function, if it was possible for somebody to work remotely on a permanent basis, that was our model, because we were always under this price pressure, and we felt like it was never going to come back. Anybody who felt our industry was coming back would be kind of like the taxi cab driver waiting for Uber and Lyft to go away. It's just not going to happen. So the last position I'll tell you about is we had a senior bookkeeper. We were paying her $77,000 a year. All in, she was $92,000. We found a superstar overseas that we paid $26,000, and we saved another $68,000. I mean, these are enormous savings. It's the higher priced talent you have, obviously the bigger the savings are going to be. So here's kind of a summary where if you look at the album designers, IT, I put in here a second programmer, We also offshored another position in accounting. As I look at our office staff today, if we did not start working with a remote team, we would be spending over $400,000 more in salary to keep everybody in the office. And the reality is, with our current sales volume, we would be underwater. We would be unprofitable, and I don't think we'd still be in business. Our company is still viable. It's still profitable. And, even if the industry continues to contract, we'll still be okay because we are so lean and mean. So what's interesting throughout all this, and I told you there was a lot of brain damage in our industry, a lot of competitors going under, and just, industry trade shows shrinking. It was just really bad. And I would have several companies that I was friends with. The owners would say, how come you guys are doing okay? Competitor A, B, and C shut down. And I was telling them about our outsource model. And they're like, well, how do we get into that? And we're starting to get a lot of interest where, okay, Zucker, you're onto something. You got to share your contacts because we want to try this too. So 4 years ago, when my COO and I were talking, and by the way, her name is Cherry, she said to me, 75–80% of our staff is in the Philippines. We're working with outsourced companies. We're working with individuals. We're working with smaller groups. They're all over the country. It's a big mess. Why don't we consolidate? We'll start our own company. We'll put everybody in the same office. And then more importantly, we could start to promote this service to other companies. Because just in our industry alone, we knew there would be a lot of interest. So 3 years ago, we started an outsourced company in Manila. That's a picture of our office, and some of those people work for us, and some of them work for other clients. And we've got a talented team with a lot of the same really good culture that we built here in Deerfield. And we've been working with remote talent for so long, it's like we don't even think of it as a different team. So what's interesting about the outsource business, another real benefit, which I didn't fully understand until we got into it, is there's a lot less liability. I don't know if you guys are like me. When you started the business and you're entrepreneurial, you start the business because you want to do something exciting. You want to solve a problem. You want to have more control over your own destiny. What you don't want to deal with is what I call the employee issues or all the drama that goes with being a business owner, right? So today we're dealing with, carpal tunnel vision, bullying in the office, harassment, unemployment insurance, pandemics, accidents, wrongful termination. None of the images on this slide is the reason why any of us got into this business or started a business, nor refereeing and performance reviews and all this other stuff. So the nice thing about the outsourcing is not only are the cost savings very significant, you also don't have the liability. You don't have to deal with all this. You're really just directing your employees. So if you were to hire somebody for data entry, and let's say they have a problem with their wrist and other things, it's not your problem. It's the outsourced company's problem, and they have to deal with it. I don't want to come across as somebody who's cold and doesn't care about these things. I care about these things, but at least as a business owner, we're not distracted by it. So here's a kind of a summary of the main reasons why companies get into outsourcing. And it's really outsourcing offshore. I'm really talking more about offshoring. The primary reason is profits are being squeezed. There's a lot of businesses, you hear every business owner talking about health insurance keeps going up and cybersecurity costs and all these other expenses. They just never go away. And if you do business in the state of Illinois, they're not shy about raising taxes every so often. I remember when I came here in '95, I'm thinking, wow, Illinois' taxes are half the price of New York. And now I look around and we're on par with New York, and everybody's going to Indiana and Wisconsin. So maybe I picked the wrong state, but I'm here and I love it. And, so really the big takeaway is it's primarily motivated by financial pressure. Second reason is there's a lot of companies that are not being squeezed. They're just looking to be more profitable, either because they want to invest in their business or as an owner, they want to take more money out. College is very expensive. When my kids were little, I didn't put away nearly enough money because my financial advisor said, you'll need about $20,000 a year by the time your kids get to college. And he was off by about $30,000. But, taking money out and just putting money away for yourself or reinvesting is another great reason to reduce your costs. For some companies, it's having an extra pair of hands just to get stuff done. I know one business owner who said to me, I hire a lot of summer interns, and what's great is when they're here, they just clean up all the work that gets piled up for the year that nobody wants to do, and then when they leave and go back to college, there's nobody here. And he ended up hiring a couple of people from us, for $9 an hour, which is basically the intern rate, so that they have that consistency throughout the year. And the last reason we hear for why companies get into offshoring is just a scarcity in skill set. Sometimes you just can't find the right person for your job. And I'm not here to pick on millennials, but I've heard that millennials have a hard time sticking with jobs, and depending on what type of company you're in, if there's a lot of turnover, it can be really frustrating. We work with a client in the Twin Cities that has a business. He sells online wedding dresses and bridesmaid dresses. And he said to me, his staff works from 8 to 4, and after 4 o'clock, everybody leaves. Nobody ever wants to work a second shift because he's in an industrial building. It's a nice area. He says, but you put 2 mid-20 females in an empty industrial building, nobody wants that job. So he said to me, I need a team of 3 people that can handle my support from 4 p.m. to midnight, and I don't even care about the cost savings. Obviously, I'm happy to have them. I just can't find these people. And these millennials, after 3 weeks, they want to tell me how I should be doing the business and, how I need to change everything. So, that's been another reason. So now I'm going to share a couple of the most popular positions that companies use for outsourcing. We've seen a big trend the last 6-8 months, anything to do with accounting. Bookkeepers are probably our number one, it's probably our best seller right now. And the reason for that is most small businesses are on QuickBooks. Everybody knows QuickBooks. QuickBooks, you can get the desktop or the online version, and the online version just feels like it was built for outsourcing. And the other reason is numbers are numbers. It's a lot easier to hire an experienced bookkeeper to learn the elevator business or the home building business than it is to teach them customer service. The second most popular is customer service or help desk. And this could be email, chat, ticketing, live phone, telemarketing. There's all kinds of different ways to do this. I'm sure you've all experienced calling a credit card company, an airline, AT&T. The large companies have been working with outsourced companies for many, many years, and they have massive call centers overseas, whether it's India or the Philippines. Those are the 2 primaries. IT, I mentioned that earlier. Silicon Valley, that's, the land of startup. And in many companies, the CTO, the software architect, all the high level, and a lot of times the entrepreneur, him or herself, are in tech. But once they figure out the plan and say, okay, here's what we're going to build, they go to a guy like Aji, or they go to another company and say, I need a team of 5 or 10 people, and they go to Belarus or the Ukraine or someplace else where the labor rates are significantly less than Silicon Valley or any place in the U.S. Digital marketing, we've seen a big spike in too. Digital marketing is an interesting area in that it kind of overlaps with website design or graphic design, and a lot of times those are great positions for remote. You don't necessarily need to interact face-to-face with a web designer or a graphic designer. And of course, post-COVID, nobody's face-to-face anyway. So the nice thing is you can get on a Zoom call and you don't have to wear a mask. You can actually see somebody's face. So the other thing I thought I would do, which would be fun, is when Lori and I talked, I was probing her for, hey, what kind of industry are all your members in? Because I wanted to be more succinct and give some really good recommendations. So I'm going to run through a few slides. The first one here is professional services. I know there's a couple of marketing shops here. I know, Tanya, you're in the, you and Lexi are in the marketing business. So positions that are good for outsourcing are website design, graphic design, and digital marketing. Insurance, I know there's a couple of insurance companies. There's a lot of paperwork and a lot of billing and a lot of forms to fill out. Billing, bookkeeping, customer support. Virtual assistant is another one that's become popular. Financial services, a lot of presentations being made. A lot of times these are templates, and it's just a lot of busy work. So there's been some project work for presentations and on the marketing side. And I know there's also a banker in the group, Centris Bank. And I don't know a whole lot about banking, but I imagine there's some opportunity to do some type of monitoring. I know some banks have teams overseas that, look at video all day long. That seems like an awful job. But, it would seem like it'd be a lot less expensive to offshore that than to do it here in the States. On the IT side, cybersecurity, I know we work with a managed IT service company, and they've got several people in different locations, and they're just monitoring all of our servers and every other one of their clients. That seems like it would be a good one, or desktop support that could be outsourced. Software development, Ajay could certainly speak more intelligently about this than I do because he's got a large team in India, but we've seen developers at all levels, juniors, mids, seniors, QA folks, network administrators, database administrators. It's really interesting when you have to reduce cost, you find that positions that you never imagined could be performed remotely. I mean, I have now a guy overseas who does desktop support with me. I'm not the most technically savvy person, and he logs into my computers and fixes all the things that I'm afraid to touch. I never thought that would be possible. IT and phone systems, a lot of sales support, web and mobile device or application developers. There's always bookkeeping. Bookkeeping's a good one. I know, Lori, there's a couple of members are involved in staffing in PLC. So prospecting, telemarketing, data entry, customer service, these are mostly $9 to $11 an hour jobs. I mean, they're really interesting. Even if it's, we've had companies come to us and say, I'm in a seasonal business. I only need somebody 8 months a year. Well, nobody wants to accept a position for 8 months a year. And what we always say is there's so much savings, even for the 4 months, if you're overpaying them a little bit and they're not so busy, it's still a lot less than having talent here in the States. Executive search firms, bookkeeping services. We work with some bookkeeping services that, or how about this? I know of bookkeeping service companies that have all the work done here, and I know others that their model is 100% offshore. And that's a really interesting model. It's not only bookkeepers, AP clerks, payroll. Some companies are a little leery about outsourcing payroll. That's usually the last thing that happens. It usually starts with an accounts payable. They get comfortable that remote people that they've never seen face to face are looking at all their books. But like in any employee situation, there's agreements and confidentiality, and we can overcome most of those objections. And lastly, this is the miscellaneous slide where if you're a home builder, and forgive me, I don't know a ton about this business, but I don't know if it's possible to have a remote architect or somebody doing drawings or proposals. But even if something like that is available part-time, it's probably a good cost savings. Michael, I know you're in the elevator business. Everybody has bookkeeping, customer support, website refreshes. Those are always good things to outsource. And for distributors or even manufacturers, e-com, if you're a distributor and you're selling online, which if you're not today, you're out of business, right? Because there's no other commerce being conducted. There's a lot of work involved in constantly updating sites and managing the photo database and cleaning up photos to make sure that the products look great. So that's kind of my roll call of here's some ideas on how to do things. So before I end with a happy ending, because every storytelling ends with it's always a good story, right? There's always a princess or a prince and all good things happen. Let me just share the bad news slide. COVID. I mean, this has been an absolute disaster for all of us. Well, actually, I shouldn't say all of us. Some companies are doing really well. Mariano's and Jewel are probably doing really well, but most businesses are really suffering. There's been a lot of lost revenue starting in mid-March. And the worst part is we don't know when this is going to end, right? We know we're shut down through the end of the month. I'm sure we're all universally aligned that we would like to see this lift in June 1st, or if not, shortly thereafter. And the reality is we're all going to have declining revenue through this year and maybe for part or all of 2021. If you're in the haircutting business, the place where I go to get a haircut, I mean, I'm sure they're going to be lining up on day one, and he's going to be at 100% capacity because everybody still needs a haircut. But not all businesses are going to start up fully. Most companies are going to end this year with a loss. which is not a good thing. Office salaries, when you look at the line items on your profit and loss statement, that is usually the most expensive line item. And also the cost of doing business just continues to increase. I have yet to see health insurance. Just for fun, our COO reached out to our Blue Cross agent and said, nobody's getting sick. All of our employees' kids are not in sports. Nobody's breaking bones. Nobody's going to see doctors. Can we get a reduction just like our auto insurance company? And they said, no. So that was wonderful. Everybody else seems to be willing to work with you, or a lot of companies are, but not the health insurance. They're going to find a way to continue to increase our costs. Some other costs that keep going up are online advertising. I'm not sure how many of you are involved in, I'm going to call it the scam of online advertising, because I just feel like we keep pouring more and more money into it, and companies are getting less and less of a return. That's a separate rant. I'm happy to have a beer with somebody if you want to hear my thoughts on that. But the reality is the advertising, whether it's LinkedIn advertising, online advertising, it's just very expensive. And all the cybersecurity, I mean, I look at what we spend on security and all these different things that we do, and the time involved, that goes up every year. So unfortunately, cost of doing business, and we live in a state that, apparently doesn't have a lot of reserve, so we know where taxes are going to be headed over the next couple of years as well. So that's all the bad news. The rest, now I'll talk about the silver lining here. Lean and mean is the key to survival and thrival. I made up that word. It rhymes with survival. It just sounded good.
I use that word.
Every company, I'm sure every one of you, we're all doing the same thing as soon as this hit. We pulled out our credit card bills and we went through and said, okay, what's absolutely necessary and what's a nice to have? And we're going to pare down our nice to haves and really get lean and mean. We spent a good amount of time with AT&T, and it's just amazing how many phone lines we still had that we didn't need. We had a fax machine that we discontinued 3 years ago. We were still paying for a fax line. I'm sure you've all had similar discoveries. And the good news is when things do open, I feel like many of us will be in a better position. Because of this pandemic, we've all gotten comfortable with virtual. Our company was, I want to say, somewhat unique in that on any given day, and this is back in the day before we outsourced a lot of office staff, we had a lot of moms with little kids, and if their kids were sick, they would just work from home and log in, and, it was business as usual. So we never had a problem with the remote, or some people just, commuted from really far distances, and the deals we made upon hiring where you can come in 3 days a week and work from home 2 days a week. Now, there are a lot of business owners who are like, nope, everybody's got to come to work. Well, that's all changed. So virtual is no longer an obstacle. And so having remote staff, whether they're remote in Palatine or the Philippines, it's really the same. And it's been totally acceptable for clients as well as business owners. I mean, I look at all of our backgrounds and we see living rooms and, cats crawling across our computers and kids coming in and go, oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were on a call. That's kind of the new way to do business. So the good news is if you're in a position where you can have work done remotely on a permanent full-time basis, you can typically save $20,000 to $40,000 a year per employee, which for a lot of companies that are looking at how the year is going to end, this is a really meaningful number. And one other thought to share too is, offshoring it's not only full-time employees, but it's also project work. There are websites like Indeed and Upwork where if you're looking for a logo design or a project here or something there, a data entry product, somebody to organize your photos, there's all these different freelancers out there where you end up finding somebody in Romania who's willing to do something for $30 that you're thinking, oh my God, this will take me 10 hours. Why would they ever want to do it? But there's a lot of ways to reduce costs by going that route as well. So I'll close with, this is kind of the big takeaway. For companies who can operate with remote talent, right? Like Michael, your business servicing elevators, you need human beings in your company uniforms with the company name on it going out and fixing it. They still need to do that, but there might be opportunities where some of the back office. So it's a proven way to reduce cost, increase profits while also building contingency within your staff. So it's interesting as I kind of, take a stock on our company and I say, boy, if my COO wasn't so darn smart and suggested this to me 9 years ago, this is probably the sign that would have been hanging on our front door a couple of years ago, where instead we have this one.